Hello there, you're welcome to Joy 99.7 FM and Joy News here on the Joy News channel. It is the Ghana Institute for Public Policy Options and the Multimedia Group presenting the 2020 Baah-Wiredu Memorial Lecture. And this year is on the theme Protecting the Public Purse, the Media and Fighting Corruption in the Fourth Republic of Ghana. The speaker for today is Manasseh Azuri Awini and the chairperson is Professor Audrey Gajekbo. The host is Dr. Charles Rekubrobe, who is speaking at the moment. Let's listen to him.
Service as an avenue for greedy people to try and improve themselves. But at least in my experience in the Fourth Republic, we had one outstanding public servant whose humility, devotion to duty, excellence, and ability to ensure that everything he did was in the best spirit and in the best interest of the country, and that he pursued what was for the public good and not for his private greed. The late Baah-Wiredu was a politician who served in all the 8 years of the Kufuor government, first as Minister of Local Government, then Minister of Education, and finally as the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, where I had the privilege to work with him. And that's where also I met the Deputy Minister of Finance and Economic Planning, Mr. Koku Kwarteng, who, despite the big campaign that he has to do, has joined us today. Welcome, Kweku. For me, I think if you go back to what Dr. J.B. Danko once said, is Ghana worth dying for? The usual riposte is, it is not. But even though Baah-Wiredu died in office, not literally for Ghana, his is an example that should guide all of us that public service is a noble calling and that the best should be encouraged to serve and must serve without blemish. When he died tragically in South Africa in September 2008, everybody on every side of the political divide in Ghana was fulsome in their praise for this distinguished son of Ghana. And I at least thought with a few colleagues that we should institute these memorial lectures, firstly to honor him, but more importantly, to try and live the exemplary life through essays, discussions on the need for the highest level of integrity to be displayed in public office. This is the fifth that we've been able to organize, and I'm glad that all of you are here to join in honoring him. I must say and pay a special thank you to our collaborator for all these 5 lectures, the Multimedia Group, which has shown a lot of support to these lectures and carried every single one of them live on its network. Because we want to make sure that everybody in Ghana gets an opportunity to hear not me, but the speaker. I think there's enough of me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Charles Rekubrobe, and he made it quite brief. We appreciate that. And I know there are a number of prominent people who are here this evening. The Deputy Finance Minister has been introduced, but there are still quite a number of people here who are also very prominent. You know yourselves. I don't need to mention your names, do I? Thank you very much. So the chairperson for this evening's function is Dr. Audrey Gadzekpo. She's an associate professor at the Department of Communication Studies and the Dean of the School of Information and Communication Studies, University of Ghana. She has more than 27 years of experience in teaching, research, and advocacy in media, gender, and governance, and done close to 30 years in practical experience as a media practitioner, including as a newspaper columnist, magazine editor, publisher, talk show host, and reporter editor. Now, there are lots of journalists and communication persons or practitioners who would say that, yes, they have known Professor Audrey Gadzekpo. They've gone through her hands, and she's quite well respected. We are honored to have her here today to chair this evening's function. Let's welcome her with a round of applause as she comes to give us a
Thank you, Israel. And good evening, everybody. I first of all would like to thank Dr. Charles Rekubrobe for hosting this exciting event, and to all others who've been involved in organizing the public lecture. I am honored to have been invited to chair what promises to be a very enlightening conversation on how the media can help to protect the public purse and fight corruption. The fight against corruption is one of the most intractable challenges for citizens, governments, and civil society. You only have to reach back into this country's history to understand how long and how fraught the anti-corruption battle has been. Of course, it's not a fight for media alone, but it is appropriate that we interrogate the media's role for a variety of reasons, including the fact that they are an integral part of all national integrity systems expected to fight corruption. They are expected to have the capacity to investigate, to expose, to bring transparency to issues, to provide a platform for public discussion, and to exert pressure on governments and duty bearers to be more accountable to us, the citizenry. I think it's also important to note that we have a current democratic dispensation that gives the media structural rights and constitutional protection to be able to prosecute this fight. Whether or not they have the capacity to do this is another matter. But I will not preempt the speaker. I will anticipate, though, knowing who he is, that we will be treated to a critical appraisal of media performance that can illuminate some of the issues I've just raised. We should be prepared, ladies and gentlemen, to hear some uncomfortable home truths that hopefully, and in the spirit of this public lecture, will encourage our media to reflect more carefully on the role they have performed in guarding the public purse and what they ought to be doing to exact accountability from government and other duty bearers. So I have the pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Manasseh Azuri Awuni. And Manasseh is an award-winning freelance investigative journalist whose groundbreaking stories have resulted in the cancellation of major government contracts, led to the imprisonment of culprits and the retrieval of monies, and also to shaping policies here in Ghana. And let me just give you an example. He is award-winning because in 2010, the year he left journalism school, he won the Ghana Journalists Association's Most Promising Journalist of the Year award. A year later, in 2011, he was adjudged Journalist of the Year by the GJA. and are the maiden West African Media Excellence Awards, which were organized by the Media Foundation for West Africa in 2017. He again won an award. He was adjudged the Best Investigative Reporter. In 2018, he won the Best Anti-Corruption Reporter and overall Best Journalist in West Africa at the second edition of the Media Foundation Awards. Manasseh holds a bachelor's degree from the Ghana Institute of Journalism, and I'm proud to say a master's degree from the School of Communication Studies at the University of Ghana, where I work. He has authored a couple of well-received books, including Voice of Conscience and Letters to My Future Wife. So let me invite Manasseh to the podium. Manasseh.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that introduction. I must say Prof is also one of the people who quietly supports journalists like me. I remember she used to have a mentoring program at her house when she would cook for all of us and would discuss matters of the state. Chairperson Professor Audrey Gadjekpo, the Chief Analyst at the Ghana Institute for Public Policy Options, Dr. Charles Rekumbrobey, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen. When John Agyekum Kufuor was sworn into office as the second president of the Fourth Republic in 2001, I was busy preparing for my basic education certificate examination far away in Ketekrachi. I was still in journalism school when he left office in 2009. For this reason, I did not have the close interaction with that administration and its officials. However, my internship with Ghana Television in 2007 gave me the opportunity to cover a few official assignments involving top government officials such as ministers of state. It was one of such assignments that left me with the first of two most enduring memories of the late Baah-Wiredu, who was Ghana's finance minister at the time. It was an assignment at the La Palm Royal Beach Hotel, and after the function, Mr. Baah-Wiredu spent time moving around to share pleasantries with the journalist in a manner that suggested or looked as if they were actually colleagues. For me, it was rare. Normally, journalists often go to such top officials after assignments, but in this case, the reverse was the issue. The second incident that had him etched in my mind for years happened at the outer reception of the car park of the Ghana Broadcasting Corporation, when he came there one blistering afternoon to wait for some journalists with whom he was attending a program at Tema. I had helped a senior colleague to the car park, and the minister came out to welcome them before they took off. In a part of the world where a call to serve in a political office and the title honorable appear to confer supernatural status on most people, the likes of Baah-Wiredu of the Kufuor era, Dr. Victor Bampo of the John Mahama era, and Dr. Yao Osei Educhum of the Kufuor administration are shining examples that people can serve in high political offices and still not part ways with decency and the respect for the people they serve. I therefore feel highly honored and privileged to be delivering a lecture that celebrates the memory of Mr. Baah-Wiredu, a man many say served with integrity. I'm grateful to Dr. Charles Rekumbrobey and his team. Madam Chairperson, I was barely 8 years old when the Fourth Republic began in 1993, and I've only been a journalist for 10 out of the almost 28 years of this republic. So my first reaction upon receipt of this invitation was to question my own capacity for such a huge task. I was, however, encouraged by the wisdom of our elders who say that the size of an animal does not matter. What matters is the taste in its soup. I've uncovered some of the biggest corruption scandals in the Fourth Republic, involving some of the most powerful persons and businesses. What I'm about to share with you, therefore, is not going to be only what I have read or heard, but also what I have done, lived and experienced in the Ghanaian media's fight against corruption. President John Agyekum Kufuor came into office with a solemn declaration of zero tolerance for corruption, but he's often quoted to have said that corruption was as old as Adam. It is important to state that corruption in Ghana did not begin in the Fourth Republic. In fact, it started long before the First Republic. Corruption was here with us when our nation was still called the Gold Coast and ruled by the colonialists. The Akin-Waston Commission of Inquiry, which was set up to investigate the disturbances that led to the killing of some ex-servicemen in the Gold Coast in February 1948, could not ignore the issue of corruption in its report. Corruption wasn't part of the Commission's terms of reference, neither was it a cause of the disturbances. The Commission, however, noted corruption in its report. It said, and I quote, "It would be ideal to ignore the existence of bribery and corruption in many walks of life in the Gold Coast, admitted to us by every responsible African to whom we addressed the question. That it may spread further as responsibility devolves upon the African is a possibility which cannot be denied. No nation can rise to greatness upon any such foundations. It is a challenge, therefore, to the Gold Coast Africans to set their house in order, and a challenge which we believe will be taken under the weight of responsibility. In any case, in any event, in our view, its existence cannot be accepted as a barrier on the road to self-government." End of quote. The Watson Commission was prophetically right. Corruption did not stop us from fighting for and gaining independence. But corruption, as predicted by the Commission, spread like an incurable pandemic when we took over the affairs of this country. We did not put our house in order, and corruption has definitely stopped our country from rising to the greatness as the Commission predicted 72 years ago. Today, we cannot undertake any major projects or implement a policy without going to beg or borrow from nations, some of which are less endowed with human and natural resources than us. These debts which are sinking our nation are monies that have been borrowed to finance the ever-growing corruption industry. Corruption has put the gear of our nation's development on a reverse. It has hurt and continues to threaten the survival of our democratic experience, and will one day set this nation ablaze, as it has done in the past, if we don't tame it. After independence, corruption was the basis for many military uprisings that became a disturbing rhythm in our political space until sanity prevailed in 1992, when we opted for the ballot instead of bullets in determining how long a government stays in power. In Ghana today, we worship money without questioning its source. In our churches, people who pay tithes with bags of cash are those who grace the front pews. In many parts of the world, businessmen and women find solutions to the society's problems and profit from them. Here, some of our business people rather create problems for our society in order to profit. They are considered to be smart because they have the ability to cut corners. To them, the end often justifies the means, so they will steal their way to the top and spend the rest of their lives concocting stories to justify how they became rich. In discussing corruption, we often think only about the politicians, but I dare say that some of the most corrupt people in this country are not into politics. Putting emphasis on the political class is, however, not misplaced because politicians, when in office, have the power to curb corruption. They also control a chunk of the nation's resources. What 1,000 extremely corrupt policemen or women can extort by way of road duty allowance in their lifetime cannot match the kickbacks from a single contract awarded by a political office holder. The fecal matter of one elephant, our wise elders have noted, is definitely heavier than the combined effort of 1,000 mosquitoes with acute diarrhea. Due to the excessive monetization of our politics, especially in the Fourth Republic, the stakes in political corruption are very high. Last Sunday, an executive member of the Ghana Pentecostal and Charismatic Council, Bishop Samuel Moy-Mensah, said at a forum organized by Joy FM that since 1992, when the Fourth Republic began, every successive government has been more corrupt than the previous government. If what he said is anything to go by, then we are witnessing the most corrupt administration of the Fourth Republic. His observation, as sad as it is, represents the reality for many Ghanaians who are concerned about the turn of events in the last few years. I started my investigative journalism in the John Mahama era, and by 2016, I was convinced that the John Mahama administration was the most corrupt government in the Fourth Republic, and perhaps in the history of our country. I said to some of my colleagues that no government could ever be half as corrupt as the Bahama regime because of what I had personally experienced. It didn't take long for the Akufo-Addo administration to show me how naive I had been. Mahama's West ranking on the Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index is even better than Akufo-Addo's best ranking. And I dare say that the Corruption Reality Index might even be worse than the perception. In this election, corruption is not a major campaign topic for the two main political parties. This is unusual, but understandable. Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and the MPP won the 2016 election with a sustained anti-corruption campaign, and the fact that the party cannot campaign on corruption says a lot about the reality on the ground. The NDC, on the other hand, lost the right to campaign on corruption back in 2016. So what is often the main rallying point for change is missing in our political campaign this season. Some have argued that the perception of corruption is high in the Fourth Republic because of the vibrant media landscape. For instance, President Mahama, in one of his presidential encounters with the media, explained that the perception of corruption in his government was fueled by the media exposures. To him and other government officials, the perception of corruption was higher than the reality. That school of thought often holds the view that the freer the media, the higher the perception of corruption. In 2018, however, I visited the headquarters of Transparency International and interviewed those who compiled these reports, and they said that wasn't the case. I also took some time to analyze the Corruption Perception Index and also the Media Freedom Index. In 2016, for instance, the best 20 ranked countries in the World Press Freedom Index by Reporters Without Borders also featured prominently in the 20 best ranked countries by Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index. Out of the 20 best ranked countries in media freedom, 16 of them were among the best ranked in the Transparency International's CPI. Countries that rank badly in Press Freedom Index tend to rank poorly in corruption perception because corruption and the repression of free press are both products of bad governance. There are, however, a few countries such as Singapore and Rwanda which rank poorly in Press Freedom Index but rank very well in Corruption Perception Index. Ghana is also one such outlier with a good press freedom ranking, but ranks poorly in corruption perception. This calls for a critical interrogation because our elders have taught us that when a man with healthy teeth is chewing his food awkwardly, then we must be sure that there is sand in that food. Part of the sand is the failure of the media in the performance of their watchdog function. In the words of Albert Kandapa, who is the National Security Minister, a democracy without checks and balances is worse than a dictatorship. Back in junior high school, we're told that the separation of powers of the executive, legislature, and the judiciary was meant to ensure checks and balances. In practice, however, our legislature appears to be a puppet of the executive, and our judiciary is yet to give the average Ghanaian enough reason to believe that it has a mind of its own and will not succumb to the overwhelming powers and influence of the executive. The framers of the 1992 Constitution perhaps knew this would happen. That's why they empowered the media to hold these arms of government accountable to the people. Article 162(5) of the Constitution states, and I quote, "All agencies of the mass media shall at all times be free to uphold the principles, provisions, and objectives of this Constitution, and shall uphold the responsibility and accountability of the government to the people of Ghana." The media in Ghana lived through a period of repression until in 1992, when the Constitution gave it freedom. Media organizations have seen an exponential growth since 1992. From only the state broadcaster at the inception of the Fourth Republic, Ghana now has about 400 radio stations and tens of television stations. The internet has enabled hundreds of media portals to compete with our newspapers. The important question, however, is whether beyond the numbers, the media have been effective in the fight against corruption. This is the question I would attempt to answer. I also intend to share with you what I believe are detrimental to the media's fight against corruption and suggest the way forward. At the onset of the Fourth Republic, the media were more aggressive in their newfound freedom, and the fight against corruption and human rights abuses was a cherished virtue. Newspapers such as the Chronicle, the Enquirer, the Crusading Guide, and to some extent the Palaver are examples of media entities that did fearless journalism. Newspapers at the time found satisfaction in the quest to outpace one another in unraveling scandals and making people and institutions accountable. The state-owned media have never been truly independent and have therefore lacked the ability to be critical of the government. Private radio and television stations were late entrants to the media industry. They came in the Fourth Republic, but a few of them still have contributed very well to the fight against corruption. In the last 10 years, however, the number of media houses committed to the fight against corruption in Ghana has dwindled. One media organization that has been consistent in fighting corruption through investigative journalism and documentaries is the multimedia group, specifically Joy FM and JoyNews TV. I am mindful of the fact that the Tiger Eye Private Investigations has also been very consistent in its anti-corruption investigations, but the emphasis was on media entities. If you ask me how the media has performed in the fight against corruption in the Fourth Republic, I will say it is below average. Out of 10, I will award the media 3 marks for the effort. It is getting worse by the day, and critical journalism is dying in Ghana. If you wake up every morning and scan through the various channels and read the papers, you hardly find journalism that is holding power accountable. Ask any Ghanaian to name the investigative journalists we have in this country, and they will not be able to count beyond the fingers on one hand. And this is unfortunate for a country with over 500 media organizations and tens of thousands of journalists. The reasons the media are failing in their fight against corruption are many, but I will mention a few of those I consider to be very important. In Tree, it is said that se koto wiana ne bansu wia na hwan na beje ne nyonko tata. To wit, if both the crab and its offspring crawl, then who will help the other to walk? Martin Luther King Jr. put it differently when he said that darkness cannot drive away darkness. The corruption that is sinking our society has not spared the media. The actions of some journalists and media houses encourage acts of corruption. In some cases, individual journalists who cannot resist the temptation decide to look the other way while the rot continues. At times, the problem is with the media owners who refuse to publish stories from journalists. In 2013, we lost one of the finest journalists in this country, Samuel Ajiman of Metro TV. And what happened? Samuel did a very good investigative piece on Suba Info Solutions contract with the GRA, but he was stopped from airing that story on Metro TV. So he published it on YouTube and walked away from the media organization. He's now into corporate communications, and he's one great journalist this country has ever produced. Any journalist in Ghana today who wants to fight corruption will soon realize that the fiercest opponents are their fellow journalists, who for one reason or the other would fight on the side of those stealing from the state. In 2017, for instance, I published an investigative series titled Robbing the Assemblies, in which I revealed fraudulent sanitation contracts that had robbed the nation and our assemblies hundreds of millions of cedis. It was this investigation that revealed that a beanliners contract that was supposed to cost 900,000 Ghana cedis, less than 1 million cedis, was awarded to the Jospon Group at a cost of over 64 million Ghana cedis. And this contract was actually championed from the Flagstaff House, led by Julius Debra, who was the chief of staff, and he asked Collins Dowda to sign a contract when they did not even need this procurement. Eventually, this investigation led to the cancellation of a $74 million contract. However, not many in the media were enthused that I had gone back to the Zoom Lions table after first visiting it in 2013 in my JIDA investigations. The Ghana Journalists Association, for instance, issued a press statement against that investigative work saying, "I should not destroy Ghanaian companies." The most disturbing part of that press statement was that the GGA could not state a single ethical code I had breached in that investigation. The morning after that press statement, there was a call from Zoomline to one of my colleagues at Joy FM, asking him to table the GGA press statement in support of Zoomline for discussion. Of course, Joy FM did not do that, but a number of media houses did that, and it was very prominent. It took anti-corruption civil society organizations and the Media Foundation for West Africa to come to my defense. I remember Professor Odrigajepo, who is chairing today's function, was one of those who took on the GGA, saying it had become a victim of corporate capture. Distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, another reason the media have not been strong in the fight against corruption is the lack of protection for investigative journalists and anti-corruption journalists. Whoever engages in the fight against corruption takes on a very dangerous venture, whether that person is a journalist, a politician, or civil society. And I must say that even if the president gets serious about fighting corruption, his life will be endangered. Nigeria's former finance minister, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, has written a book titled "Fighting Corruption is Dangerous." In that book, she recounts how her 83-year-old mother was kidnapped in 2012 by forces who objected to some of the government's anti-corruption programs she was spearheading. They asked her to go live on television and resign. They could not have their way, unfortunately, and her mother escaped miraculously. Elvis Afiankra, who was the Minister of Youth and Sports in 2013 when I broke the JIDA scandal, recounted in 2018 that he nearly lost his life for supervising the JIDA committee's work and overseeing some of the actions that were taken. So if the minister who did not break the story faced danger, then one can imagine the plight of the journalists who broke the scandal that resulted in the loss of jobs, cancellation of contracts, the collapse of companies. If you remember, in 2013, RLG was #1 on Ghana's Club 100. But after those investigations, today we cannot see RLG. And the imprisonment of people and other consequences. The threat facing investigative journalists in Ghana is enormous. That threat has always been there, but it has been heightened in the past 4 years because the body language of this administration is that of viciousness and intolerance. I, as a journalist, have never felt so unsafe in this country as I feel within this period. And many of my colleagues share the same concern. In 2019, for instance, Emmanuel Dogbevi, an investigative journalist and founder of the Ghana Business News, told Forbidden Stories, an international non-profit working for the safety of journalists, and I quote, "I feel very unsafe, especially since this government came to power." We all recall that in the period of this administration, a leading member of the governing New Patriotic Party put the photograph of an undercover investigative agent on television, told his audience that a man lived in Medina and whoever saw him should attack him. This was after the #12 investigative documentary led by Anas Arimiao Anas. Ahmed Swale was later shot and killed in Medina, and up to date, nobody has lost sleep over the matter. The government has not given any evidence to justify why gun-wielding operatives of the national security stormed the offices of modernghana.com harassed the journalists there. The operatives seized their phones, computers, and other gadgets. They also arrested, detained, and allegedly tortured 2 of the journalists. According to the journalists, they were questioned about negative stories they had published about a minister of state. Till date, nothing has happened. In December 2019, some foreign ambassadors said they had observed with concern how individuals fighting against corruption in Ghana were being fought. Recently, civil society organizations were called dumb, all-knowing, and all manner of insulting names because they had dared to question a certain Japa deal. The Auditor General, who is the only public officer known to be making real impact in the fight against corruption, was hounded out of office by the president. The pressure on media houses has increased, and media owners who cannot handle them transfer such pressures to the journalist. Ladies and gentlemen, acts such as these do not only undermine media freedom, but they scare potential investigative journalists and corruption fighters from joining what is generally becoming a thankless adventure. It is unfortunate that all these are happening in the administration of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, who was marketed to us as a staunch human rights campaigner and defender of free speech. If the president is re-elected in December, he should be mindful that it is unacceptable for his record in press freedom to still be touted as the repeal of the criminal libel law, which is in fact an achievement by President John Agyekum Kufuor. We all know that the free SHS, one district, one factory, and the rest will remain the policies and legacies of President Akufo-Addo and not the ministers he appointed to implement them. Our elders say man must do his own growing up, no matter how tall his father was. We know the tolerance the media got under under President Kufuor, under Tamils, under President John Mahama, and that free speech must continue, and the current president must carve a niche for himself. The lack of action and selective justice on the part of state institutions is another disincentive to the fight against corruption. Impact is the fuel that drives activism, such as the fight against corruption. If you risk your life and the lives of your family members to expose corruption and the perpetrators are left untouched, it kills the motivation to continue to risk your life. More than a year after the contracts for sales scandal, for instance, the Office of the Special Prosecutor is yet to tell Ghanaians what it has done. Shraj is yet to release its report. Meanwhile, sources close to the Public Procurement Authority say the suspended CEO still takes his salary and enjoys his benefits as though nothing has happened. It is all to see or to say why Abuga Pele is in jail while Clement Kofi Humado, the Minister of State, who signed some of the most outrageous contracts in the JIDA scandal, is free from prosecution. Why should Zoom Lion, with all the corruption scandals around its neck, is still winning fraudulent contracts while Philip Asibit is languishing in jail for what can be described as peanuts when compared with the shady deals of the Zoom Lions and the RLGs of this world, beats one's imagination. Another setback, ladies and gentlemen, in the fight against corruption is the difficulty in accessing information. Civil society groups spent a greater part of the Fourth Republic fighting for the right to information bill to be passed. Now that it has been passed, it's still becoming very difficult to get information. I wrote to quite a number of ministries for information, and it was only one of them that responded. The Ministry of Education told me to go and pay money at the Information Ministry and come for the information. That was actually not the case when I got to the Ministry of Information. I came back with a letter that I was prepared to pay for whatever charges that they incurred in processing the information. Nobody has minded me till date. I sent that letter in August. The Ministry of Health told me it would take 3 months to be able to get that information, while some have not responded at all. We know that the MP for Ashaiman had to go to court to be able to get information from the Electoral Commission. And the sad thing is that the head of the Electoral Commission today was at the IEA, and the IEA championed the right to information law. So one would believe that those who champion the law, once they find themselves in public office, they would want to implement that law. Unfortunately, this is not the case. If journalists and the media will be emboldened to fight corruption, they will need the support of the citizens on whose behalf they fight. There is a quote that is often attributed to Harriet Tubman. The source has been disputed, but that does not negate the truth it carries. It says, and I quote, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." Many of the people for whom we fight don't appreciate it, so they rather turn around to fight the anti-corruption CSOs, media organizations, and journalists. They see no reason why somebody who is taking their money to produce guinea fowls and plant trees cannot have evidence for which that money was taken, but they would harass the journalist for exposing people from his part of the country. They see no reason why one company will continuously win dubious government contracts, but they will question why the journalist is always staying on that company. The middle class has also not helped us. Generally, the middle class is supposed to hold the governing or the ruling class accountable to the poor. But if you go back and look at the photographs of the people who took part in the Occupy Flagstaff House March in July 2014, we will realize that many of them have literally occupied the Flagstaff House and its adjoining offices with assigned positions and are now doing worse things than those against which they marched. But the media must not give up. Journalists fighting corruption cannot give up because the institutions of state have generally failed to do their work, and it will be disastrous if the media sleep on their hallowed constitutional mandate. I believe the media remains our main hope in the fight against corruption. State institutions that are mandated to do this have generally failed. When Barack Obama visited us in 2009 and told us that Africa needed strong institutions and not strong men, we hailed him. He's partly right, but I also believe we need strong men and women. Men and women not with muscular strength, but with a strength of character that lies in their conviction, integrity, and principles.
You have just been listening to Manasseh Azure-Awini, a freelance investigative journalist formerly with us here at Multimedia. He's talking about corruption. It is a 2020 Baah-Wiredu Memorial Lecture, the 5th, by the way. Manasseh has been talking about the media and the relationship between the media and corruption. He essentially talks about corruption and the fact that it slows growth and all the negative things that you can have about corruption. And then he zeroes in on the media, the role of the media when it comes to corruption. He spoke about the work of an investigative journalist. He started about how the media has seen exponential growth. Well, let's go back to Manasseh. We do have him right now.
And with the evidence that I have seen, a first-year law student can secure a successful conviction. But the question as to why the docket is still lying down more than a year after it was submitted by the CID beats my imagination. Let us look at the way forward. The state and political institutions have failed us, and the media should and must not fail. The media is gradually losing the battle against corruption because only a few media houses and journalists are doing this. While the dwindling budgets of traditional media organizations cannot support investigations, we must not ignore this important duty imposed on us by the Constitution. Our elders have taught us that the man whose corn has not sprouted must not give up planting. So we must keep planting, keep fighting until Ghana gets better. I would suggest that media organizations should set up special funds for investigative reporting and find ways of raising money for that. They should also build the capacity of reporters to specialize in the area of corruption reporting. I also encourage civil society organizations to set up non-profit newsrooms. Projects such as Corruption Watch, which is spearheaded by a number of civil society organizations in Ghana and funded by Danida, is the future of journalism that can make a meaningful impact against the fight or in the fight against corruption. This is because they have no pressure for advertising and governments cannot intimidate them. So non-profit newsrooms such as Corruption Watch can really be very effective, and they are already doing a good job. I would like to conclude by taking us back to the Watson Commission of Inquiry in 1948 and what it said about us. The commission said, and I quote, "Again, in discussion with many Africans, we found a marked disinclination to face realities. A tendency existed to take refuge in ill-founded optimism that things would come right and in the end, or that someone would find the answers. Ladies and gentlemen, no one will find the answers for us. We must find them. The Italians say a person who lives only by hope will die of despair. We cannot wish away our problems, and corruption is one of them. We must solve them ourselves. We cannot rely on luck, because even if luck was the solution, our elders have also told us that good fortune does not wake up he who is asleep. We have to be awake to the reality that corruption has deprived us of our collective dignity on the global stage and will destroy us here at home if we don't change. Our democracy is not sustainable, and our peace cannot be guaranteed if we continue to steal and deprive the youth of decent livelihoods. What happened in Nigeria recently should be a wake-up call, and let no one say Ghanaians are too timid to rise up against injustice. We are harboring potential rebels in our ever-swelling slums. I still do not know and understand why an ill-fated propaganda can lead young men to take over police stations, seize arms, block roads to the Volta region, as we recently witnessed in the Volta, the Togoland, Western Togoland issue. But what I know is that the difference between a person who has nothing to live for and a suicide bomber is thinner than the edge of a circumcision blade. Let us amend our ways and save this nation from the inescapable doom that awaits every corrupt and badly managed country where food for the masses is stolen and kept by a few. Thank you so very much for your attention.
And that's Manasseh Azuri Awuni, a freelance investigative journalist, speaking at the 2020 Baah-Wiredu Memorial Lecture. And the theme is protecting the public purse, the media, and fighting corruption in the Fourth Republic of Ghana. Manasseh talks about his experiences and why the media should not give up, even though he says the state and government institutions have failed us when it comes to the fight against corruption. I'm Gifty Andopia, and you have been watching this live here on Joy News, also on Joy 99.7 FM.